If you're someone who feels like you're stuck in habits or patterns you just can't seem to break, whether it's distractions, addictions, or behaviors that are pulling you away from the life that you know you're capable of living, this episode is for you.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, motivation, be audacious, innovation, be audacious, inspiration, be bold, motivation, be audacious.
Work that I do, the passion that I have comes from my own experience with this addiction, being addicted to porn. And then what happened is I started exploring this topic. I realized that this was an issue in my life. I realized that I was addicted to porn. And because they were living a more fulfilled life, they were in an environment that was conducive to their fulfillment. There was nothing for the addiction to really hook onto. They didn't need the addiction. What this shows us is that if you want to overcome addiction, it's not just stopping the behavior. Stopping the behavior is important. It gives you breathing room.
Sure.
All these things. But you have to not just figure out, okay, where did this come from? But even more important is to say, where in my life am I not living in a deeply fulfilling way?
What if the biggest challenge in your life right now isn't a lack of discipline or motivation, but simply a lack of awareness about the patterns quietly shaping your choices every day? This podcast is all about helping you unlock your inner greatness and live your best audacious life. Today's guest is Jeremy Lipkowitz. He's a meditation teacher and executive coach who helps people overcome addiction and regain control of their lives through mindfulness, awareness, and intentional living. Drawing from his background in science and his experience training as a Buddhist monk, Jeremy brings a powerful perspective on how we break unhealthy patterns and reclaim our own power. What really stood out to me in this conversation was Jeremy's insight that so many of the struggles we face in life, whether it's addiction, distraction, or unhealthy habits, all come back to awareness and recognizing where we may be unconsciously giving our power away. Really, really insightful stuff that I'm certainly all are going to appreciate. So let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Jeremy Lipkowitz. Enjoy. Hey, Jeremy, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to join the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, much time is spent on this podcast, encouraging individuals to live their best audacious life. And one of the analogies that we regularly use here is sort of describing like we're on a journey, a pathway, right? And on our pathway there will be things that spring up, there'll be things that take place and occur that perhaps possibly hold us back, that we need to address or get past or get through. So kind of think of it like a boulder is sort of in your path, and you got to figure a way to get up, over, around, through, because on the other side is kind of where your greatness lies. And so that's really the vein how we want to continue to encourage individuals to move forth with. It takes an audacious spirit to move in this world. It really, really does, and that's where it involves courage and braveness and resiliency. And so, and with what much of your work is really helping high achievers get past their blocks or obstacles. In this case specifically, you're centered on those that are addicted to porn, and that's an addiction. And porn, it could be a drug addiction, gambling addiction. There are still addictions nonetheless, and should be treated as an issue, a serious issue. And so, maybe as a starting point, Jeremy, I can get you to introduce yourself to the audience, talk about the work that you do, and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, and thanks for the introduction to the podcast. For people who don't know me, I'm a meditation teacher and an executive coach, and I really spend most of my time helping men overcome porn addiction and sex addiction. But as you mentioned, earlier, it's really all addictions. They're all the same at the root level. So whether you're addicted to porn or sex or video games or junk food or social media, or you could be addicted to work or exercise or,
Sure.
validation, all the different things we get addicted to and where we lose our power. That's really where my passion lies in helping people see that, on a fundamental level, see the ways that they're self-sabotaging and harming themselves and giving away their power, and then learning how to actually take it back, because it's hard to do, even when you recognize what's going on. You might have full clarity and awareness of what you're addicted to, but
Mhm.
that's what addiction is. Even when you know what it is, you still have trouble actually overcoming it. All the guys that I work with, they don't want to be addicted to porn, but they can't help it. There's something in there that is keeping them stuck. So the work I do is really helping people find that self mastery from within and overcome the addiction from the root source. And that's, it's not just using willpower and trying to brute strength force your way
Right,
through it.
right.
It's actually breaking free at the root source.
And a big part of that is sort of understanding what that root source is, or understanding what where it all comes from. And I think I would think that any sort of obstacle that you're trying to overcome, sure, there are those that can do the cold turkey thing, and God bless them for being able to find the freedom by that approach. I would say by and large, for most, it's important to understand what that root source is, understand the cause of it, and that gives you the opportunity to formulate a plan to properly attack the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would even add on to that, knowing what the root source is the first step, but even that alone is not sufficient, because a lot of people, they come to me all the time. They said they've done years of therapy. They know what their original trauma is. They know kind of what got them addicted. And then still they're having trouble letting go of it. So the first step is understanding, where does this come from? But there's a lot of other steps that go beyond that in terms of habit science and self mastery and understanding the way the mind works and
Right.
having accountability and community. So there's a lot of missing pieces out there that, because this is a sensitive topic, it's a taboo topic in our society. Most guys don't know how to get help with it, and they don't know where to go. And so they're missing a lot of these puzzle pieces. And
Mm,
so just figuring out, oh, okay, this is where I have a hole in my bucket, where I'm leaking something, where are things actually falling through the cracks? And that's kind of the work that I do.
got you. Now, I'd love to hear how your background as a Buddhist monk has influenced the work that you do, and how that feeds into and helps you, really informs your work to help your clients.
Yeah, so my background is actually more in genetics and genomics. So my background is really in the sciences.
Okay.
I later on ended up training as a Buddhist monk in Myanmar in Asia. But my background really comes from the sciences and really a passion for doing science. But it was while I was training as a graduate student, working on my undergrad and then my PhD, that I started to see the roots of this addiction in my own life. I started to see I was addicted to porn, particularly when I was in college.
Hmm.
And I started just to see the way that that was harming my relationships, harming my sense of self-worth, my own happiness, just feeling out of integrity. And then also the ways it was messing with my own concentration, my ability to do things that I care about. So in a lot of ways, the work that I do, the passion that I have, comes from my own experience with this
Got you.
addiction, being addicted to porn. And then what happened is I started exploring this topic. I realized that this was an issue in my life. I realized that I was addicted to porn and it was having these consequences, but I didn't know how to break free. I didn't know the way out. And so I
Okay.
started looking for answers. And I fortunately found some books and some research on positive psychology, and then started getting into things like neuroplasticity. And that's what really opened my eyes to a lot of this recovery work, is realizing that through things like mindfulness, I could actually train my mind to overcome addiction. And then I started getting into kind of Buddhist philosophy and
Got
realized
you.
that Buddhist philosophy is not really a religion. It's more of a science of the mind. It's really about understanding the way the mind works and understanding what happiness is, what fulfillment is, and
Hmm.
how to train the mind to attain it.
Got you. I'd love to as you're talking about your own personal journey. I'm kind of, to me, it sort of feels like there's sort of and you let me know if I'm off base or wrong here. There's a couple pivotal moments. The one to that for you to pick up the books and start looking into, like, oh my gosh, like I got to do something about this and start doing the exploration. And then another one I would imagine is, okay, now I want to do this to help other people, help high achievers specifically. Could you sort of talk about, well, am I off on the fact there were two pivotal moments here, or you tell me?
No, those actually, yeah, those are probably the two big ones. When I recognized I had my own problem and started to search for answers. And then probably the second big pivotal moment in my life was when I decided to open up to the world about my, history with this and my struggles with this, and start, being an example for other guys out there that they could talk about it, they could get help. So those really are the two big pivotal moments. I'm happy to tell you about
Yeah, what
either
sparked
one.
those? I'd love to hear it. What sparked those moments for you?
Yeah, the first moment, where I realized I had a problem was sparked by, there is a very clear moment in my life. It's like seared into my memory.
Right, right.
I was in my early 20s. I'd already finished undergrad. I was at the University of California at Davis. I'd finished undergrad, but I was staying around and working as a scientist in one of the labs. So I was in this university town, and I remember walking down the street one day, and it was a beautiful day, blue skies, it's just like amazing weather. And my life was amazing. I had a lot of, good things going in my life, a lot of friends, academic achievements, all these things. I was captain of a sports team. And I remember walking down the street, and I saw these two college girls walking in front of me, maybe freshman or sophomore. And I remember seeing them walking in front of me, and I couldn't help but stare at their bodies. And in that moment, I was so consumed by this feeling of lust, so consumed by this feeling of desire and craving and, sexual longing. And in that moment, a few really important things happened to me. The first is that I realized that this state of lust and craving is a state of suffering, that I was looking at what I didn't have rather than what I did. And my entire life up to that point was really focused on all the things I didn't have. Even though I had a lot of things to be grateful for, I wasn't actually in gratitude for those things. I was always looking around with hungry eyes of, what I didn't have and what I thought I needed. And that was suffering, that state of, I need that in order to be happy. That's what suffering is. And I realized that this porn brain that I had been created, by logging onto porn all these nights, exacerbating that feeling of lust and desire. And that, that was the second thing I really realized, is that if I don't make some fundamental change, if I don't change the way I'm living, I'm never going to be happy. Because if I keep going down this path, that's just, go for it.
I was going to say, could you describe the feeling in that moment? Like, so the realization, how did you feel about that?
It was, it was dark. It was, in many ways, it was like an existential crisis, and just this, the big question to me that came up was, am I ever going to be happy? Am I going to be miserable and depressed the rest of my life? Because the thing that was really interesting is, for everything else in my life, everything I ever put my mind to, I achieved. Captain of a sports team, stellar all-star student, graduated with highest honors, everything. I had everything I wanted, and I still wasn't happy. And so that was this moment of like, if none of this is making me happy, what is going to actually lead to inner peace and happiness? And that's what then led me to these books on positive psychology and then Buddhist philosophy, where they were really talking about, what does it mean to live a life with inner fulfillment and happiness?
And then the second shift, when you realize, oh my gosh, I got to give this to other people.
Yeah. So that was maybe 10 years later. So just to kind of like fill you in on the gap, essentially that pivotal existential crisis moment sent me down a long journey of diving deeply into meditation and mindfulness. And I ended up traveling to India and then Thailand and all these places and doing a lot of silent meditation retreats. And so for the next 10 years, meditation just became a really big part of my life. And I started teaching meditation, ended up leaving the sciences to pursue teaching meditation and mindfulness full time. But I didn't really touch the porn thing for a long time, because it was just something in my past, and it was also still a bit shameful for me to talk about, because there is so much shame around this topic. And I remember one moment, 10 years into my journey of teaching meditation, I started just talking about my history with porn to a few other guys and
Mm.
realized that, hey, this is something that affects so many people out there. There are so many people that struggle
Right.
with this in silence and are ashamed of it. And I realized in that moment that, hey, I could actually make a big impact by, first of all, just letting guys know it's okay to talk about, because again, there's so many guys who don't feel comfortable with
Right.
it, and they feel it's not okay to talk about it, because our society says, hey, this is normal, be a man, nothing's wrong with porn. But the reality is, it's out of integrity for a lot of guys. And so I just wanted to start opening up about that, and then teach guys what I did to break free from my own addiction, which was a lot of mindfulness, self-compassion, meditation training, really about mastering your mind and understanding the way your mind gets hooked on things and how to unhook yourself.
Got you. Got you. I wonder maybe if you could describe, because the addiction, i.e., porn, it's the behavior is very compulsive, right?
Hmm.
But they tell us the deeper story. They have these compulsive behaviors, and how does how do these addictions sort of meet those needs?
Yeah, so all of these addictions come from a place, they're essentially unhealthy coping mechanisms. What it
Okay.
is there's some unpleasant emotion or experience, and we don't want to feel that unpleasant emotion or experience. And so we want to numb out or escape the feeling. It might be an unpleasant emotion like boredom. It might be an unpleasant emotion like stress or
Mhm.
anxiety. It might be relationship problems. And when those come up in our nervous system, we think, oh, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel bored. I don't want to feel stressed. Let me go to something that I know reliably will give me a little escape from this feeling. It will numb me out. It'll make me escape this painful feeling. I'll
Right.
feel numb, I'll feel pleasant, whatever, I'll feel distracted. And so again, it's an unhealthy coping mechanism
Mhm.
for any addiction, whether it's porn or alcohol or cocaine. It's always running away from unpleasant. And it might be running away from some big capital T trauma,
Mhm.
some very serious thing. But it could also just be running away from, the inevitable challenges that all of us have to face in life. Again, the work stress, the boredom, the loneliness that we might be experiencing, the sense of shame around some behavior. And so learning how to not run away from difficult emotions is part of the recovery process.
Yeah. Let's start talk about the recovery process, because they're again, you talked about using neuroscience and mindfulness, and it's just a
Mhm.
matter of figuring out which makes sense for the individual in that moment. I'm assuming that's kind of the process, or is you throw everything at the wall? Is that how it works and see what sticks?
Yeah, well, what's really fascinating is neuroscience and mindfulness are essentially, the same thing. Like the way that mindfulness works is through, neuroscience. Like the way that our brain is set up is what enables mindfulness to do the magic that it does. And so you do have to have some component of mindfulness training in order to overcome addiction. And I'll give you just a little kind of story. There's this understanding that what addiction is, again, a lot of it is unconscious habits and behaviors that we do without realizing it that are sabotaging us, that are
Right.
causing harm in our life.
Mhm.
Most people realize this, it's like whatever they're addicted to, maybe it's potato chips or junk food, they don't consciously make this decision of, oh, okay, I'm gonna binge on some junk food right now. It's like I don't even know what happened. I just realized I was at the bottom of the bag of chips
Right.
before I
Right.
even
Right.
realized.
Right.
It's a compulsive, autonomic, autopilot behavior. In order to interrupt that process, we have to have some present moment awareness to see it before it happens.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're just acting on autopilot. You'll just be kind of a slave to whatever desire pops up in the moment. And so that awareness of what's happening in the present moment, one of the best ways to cultivate that awareness is through mindfulness practice, which is essentially, it's like going to the gym for the mind. It's
Gotcha.
training your mind in, being stronger in certain things that are really helpful for your life. like self-awareness, and like some other things that you can add on top. Things like self-compassion is kind of a mental muscle you can train, and it helps in recovery. Equanimity is a mental muscle you can train, and it helps in
I'm
recovery.
not familiar with that term, equanimity. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, equanimity. It's a term that we rarely hear in kind of like the modern world these days, but it's very it's very prevalent in Buddhist philosophy, especially. But it's essentially a state of mind. It's a state of being that is grounded in the face of chaos. That keeps its cool. It's like being cool-headed or grounded, even when things are stressful or chaotic.
The storm is going on, and
exactly,
the cows are flying, the farm's all over the place, and you're still in that middle state of mind.
Exactly, that middle state of mind, like being grounded. So we all know people in our life who kind of, even when things get stressful, they keep their cool. Even when somebody yells at them or berates them or says calls them names, they don't get triggered by it. They keep their cool, right? And they can respond in a skillful way and say, let's calm things down. That is a state of equanimity where you're not reactive to the things that are happening. You're able to, maintain access to your inner wisdom. You're able to say, hey, I see that you're upset. Let's talk about this, or whatever's going on. So that state of equanimity where you're not reacting with so the way it works is, if you don't have equanimity, if there's something negative that comes up in your experience, we have a tendency to push it away or fight against it. Some negativity, we say, I don't want that. Get it out of my life. This awful person, get away from me. If only I didn't have this person, then I'd be happy. Or the flip side of that is, if there's something pleasant that comes up, we tend to grasp after it and cling onto it. It's like, ooh, that chocolate chip cookie tasted really good. Oh, maybe I can have 3 more, right? And we grasp, we crave after it if we don't have equanimity.
Got you.
And so equanimity is the thing that allows us to say, hey, that was pleasant. That, felt really good, but I don't need to chase after more of it. And it's also the thing that says, hey, this emotion that I'm feeling is really unpleasant, but I don't have to run away from the emotion and try to escape into my addiction.
Yep. So that's kind of like embracing what's happening and accepting it for what it is, and still proceeding.
Exactly. Acceptance is a big part of equanimity. Yeah.
Okay. I've heard in the past, when it comes to sort of dealing with behaviors you're trying to overcome, compulsive, for example, that you introduce replacement behaviors. So instead of doing this, you introduce something else that's more positive. And I'd love to get your thought, because initially when I heard that, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good approach. However, you don't really deal with the heart of the issue. So I think what you're doing is you're putting yourself at risk for it to appear in another form. So, okay, so I've addressed this addiction to porn, right? And now every time I think about porn, I go off and I color my coloring book, right? And I feel better. But then all of a sudden, I started having this addiction to video games. And do I have to come up with a new habit? And so I'd love to get your thoughts, because I think that's kind of my first initial thought when I heard that. Replacement behaviors do serve a purpose, but they're not addressing the heart of the matter.
100%. 100%. And it's so important that everybody understands that and that's the approach that most people put to trying to overcome porn addiction or any addiction, is just say, okay, let me just stop watching, brute force, willpower. Maybe if I swap it out for something else, then. But again, if you never actually take the time to do the inner work to address the reason why you got addicted in the first place, it'll pop up somewhere else. And there's a fascinating study that shows this on a very deep level. Have you heard of the rat park experiment?
No.
So the rat park experiment, they were studying addiction back in the 70s and 80s, particularly when a lot of the soldiers were coming back from the war, and a lot of them were coming back with addiction. So they were studying addiction, and they were using this rat model. So they were studying addiction in rats, and they essentially what they put is they put morphine into the water and gave that water to the rats to drink. And they found that the rats became so addicted, they would sit there and drink the morphine water, essentially like to the detriment of everything else. They sat there and drank the water basically until they died. They were so addicted to this. It was a very strong addiction.
Right.
And it showed how powerful addiction was. But then this one researcher had a really fascinating insight. He said, well, these rats are living in these cages, these steel cages. It's kind of miserable. It's not a very natural rat environment.
Yes.
What if we gave them a more natural environment? What if we gave them exercise wheels to run around on, other rats to play with,
Right.
you know, greenery and shrubbery? What if we put them in kind of a rat park? And so what they did is they first got them addicted to the morphine water.
Okay.
They became addicted, and then they put them in the rat park and gave them the option of having the morphine water. And they found that the rats barely touched the water. They, you know, because they were living a more fulfilled life, they were in an environment that was conducive to their fulfillment. There was nothing for the addiction to really hook onto. They didn't need the addiction, right? Because they were deeply fulfilled. It's so powerful. What this shows us is that if you want to overcome addiction, it's not just stopping the behavior. Stopping the behavior is important. You know, it gives you breathing room.
Sure.
You know, all these things. But you have to not just figure out, okay, where did this come from? But even more important is to say, where in my life am I not living in a deeply fulfilling way? Where am I out of integrity with how I'm supposed to be living? If you can start doing that, you know, start living in alignment with your values, start connecting with friends, start exercising, eating right. If you live in like a rat park type of thing, then addiction, you know, that's when addiction just falls away naturally.
Yes. You're more susceptible, I would say. Is that because it's
more susceptible if you're not living that way? Yeah, you're susceptible to addiction. Exactly.
Yes. I would, you talked about sort of living a fulfilling life. I'm going to take it a step further and, you know, staying true to the podcast, not living an audacious life, right? I think you lack that fulfillment. That's where you talk about the addictions and how they can grab a hold of you. I think that's really key in understanding the way you live your life. So that's powerful. It speaks volumes. It truly, truly does.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great study, and I hope you use it from now on for your podcast because it really highlights.
No, I know you're absolutely right. It really does highlight that. You chose high achievers. Why? As your focus?
Yeah, you know, myself, I am a high achiever. I was always hyper focused on achievement, and again, you know, rock star student, you know, setting the curve in all my classes and captain of the sports team. And there are certain kinds of things that those of us who are high achievers that we struggle with and that we deal with. And so for me, it was just like I understand the mentality of somebody who has it perfect on the outside. You know, everybody looks at them and says, "Oh, you've got it. You know, you're crushing it in life." But on the inside, you feel like an imposter.
Right. Yep.
You know, because you're hiding this addiction. And so, you know, for me, I feel really, I know how to work with high achievers because I understand the psychology behind it.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah. So if we had someone out there that was listening now and starting their journey sort of towards, you know, that path of reclaiming control, if you will, what's the first step you'd recommend?
Yeah, first step I would say is get connected to a community of some sort, some kind of men's group or intentional community. If you can't find, I mean, I run one for this very purpose. It's an online community, but there should be some kind of men's group in your area. If you're part of a church, a lot of churches will have a men's group. If you can't join a group, you know, find a therapist, find a coach, find someone who you can talk to and open up to about this problem. Like the most important thing is starting to open up about this problem with someone who is a safe person to talk to.
Right.
You know, and it can be hard. A lot of people don't feel like they have anyone who's safe, you know, but that's why I have my community. That's what therapists are for, is finding someone where you can say, hey, you know, this is something I'm struggling with and I don't want to hide it anymore. And I just need to talk about that. So getting started with it, connecting, and then ideally, if it's a type of community that can hold you accountable, meaning it's not just, okay, yeah, I'm struggling with this. Oh, great. Thanks for telling me. carry on. It's, hey, thanks for telling me. I know you can do better than this. I know you can overcome this.
Yeah.
You know, finding that kind of accountability is worth so much.
Yeah, it's huge. No, I can certainly see that. Definitely. It's pretty clear that there's a shift in thinking that's really required to for this to be effective and impactful. We're talking about sort of breaking addictions. Is there, I don't know, is there sort of one particular mindset shift that people could that will make the biggest difference, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that made a big difference for me, and this is, I have a course online, and this is kind of the first thing that I tell people to do in the course, is the mindset shift of shifting to your future self and thinking about what is the road that I'm on? Like, what path am I on and where is it leading? Because this is one of the things that's really hard about overcoming porn addiction is it's not like other addictions like heroin or, something else where you see these extreme consequences immediately. The consequences of porn are subtle and they're long-term and downstream. They're things that will show up 5 years later or 10 years later, and usually they're incremental, so you barely notice them until it's too late. So if you can shift your mindset and say, is this path that I'm on leading me in a direction that's going to bring me happiness? And you can see, what I did when I had that moment that I described when I was walking down the street and saw these girls, I realized that if I didn't change my life, I was going to end up as some creepy 70-year-old dude hitting on girls at college bars.
Right.
I saw my future and I said, that's where I'm headed if I don't make a change. And so for anyone out there listening to look at your life now and say, if I keep walking down this path for another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, what is the future that I'm going to have? That will put your head on straight. You'll see that, hey, I can't, a lot of guys who are addicted to porn are in relationships. They're married men, and it's just easier for them to escape into porn. But you can say, what will my relationship be like if I continue to neglect my relationship and give all of my sexual energy to porn? And you realize that it's a fast path to divorce and breakup and unhappiness.
We've heard many stories of those exact same scenario that you described, and it doesn't bode well for our relationships. And I would even take, outside of that, even like our careers, productivity, our ability to focus. I mean, these things will impact it for sure. And so,
to live an audacious life, like anything that you care about is going to take massive effort.
It's at risk of losing. That's absolutely. And so I think it's very clear. How do you feel about a few rapid fire questions?
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. First thing that comes to your mind when you think of a morning routine, is it meditation or coffee?
Oh, both. It's got to be. I mean, coffee's number one. I wish I could say it was meditation, but coffee's number one.
All right.
I'll just tell you real quick. What I do is I brew my coffee, and then I sit down on my meditation cushion, and I put the coffee right in front of me. As soon as the meditation's done, I enjoy the coffee.
They're hand in hand then, what you said.
Yeah.
Best book on mindfulness that you've read?
Oof. Happiness by Matthew Ricard.
Okay. Why does that stand out for you?
That was the book that changed my life. That was the book that brought together neuroscience and Buddhist philosophy in a very secular way that showed me what real happiness was about.
Okay. What's the biggest misconception about porn addiction?
That it's only men. A lot of women are addicted as well. Women can easily get addicted, and it just, I guess, I would actually say that the other biggest misconception is that it's harmless. People say, "Oh, porn it's harmless. Right. I'm not hurting anyone," and it's causing so much harm societally, individually, relationally. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Go-to method for stress relief?
My personal go-to method?
Yeah.
Exercise. Exercise, sports, gym. I love like physical movement. For me, it's like it's an everyday thing. So definitely sports.
Makes sense. Okay. What advice would you give to your younger self?
You're not broken. You're okay. Like these things that you're struggling with and you're ashamed of, other people struggle with them too, and you're not alone.
What's the one thing, I know you focus on high achievers, so what's the one thing that high achievers ignore about themselves?
A lot of high achievers are incredibly self-critical
Okay.
and just hard on themselves, and a lot of high achievers do ignore the things that they're actually doing well, and the things that
Mm,
they're good at, the things that are going well in their life, and the
right,
progress that they've made. There's a tendency to just look at what they haven't achieved and what's going wrong and how they're not good
right,
enough yet.
right. Interesting, because that's, you would think that if any group of individuals that don't feel that way, it would be high achievers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting,
But a
interesting.
lot of them don't. A lot of them are miserable because they're the most self-critical.
Okay, okay. Lastly, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from working with your clients?
I would say there's a lot of different pathways to freedom. I used to think that like, oh, okay, this is how you do it. And now I realize everyone's on their own journey, and there's a lot of different ways to get to happiness and fulfillment. You just got to find what works for you, but also, you know, you do have to be honest with yourself and really have that kind of self-critical appraisal of saying, am I living in integrity or am I not?
Got you, got you, got you. Okay, okay. That felt okay. You did pretty decent. You got answers to everything, right?
Yeah, yeah, I love rapid fire. That's great.
No problem. For our listeners, Jeremy, that wanted to connect with you directly or work with you or learn more about your work, where can we send them?
Yeah, I would say if they want to learn more, the first thing is just go to my own podcast. It's the Unhooked podcast. If you
Okay.
search Unhooked on any platform, you'll find it. And then if you want to learn more about the work I do, the community that I run, the online courses for overcoming this, just go to unhookedacademy.com. That's probably the fastest way.
Got you. Let's get a podcast love here. Let's give a shout out for your podcast to tell us what it's about.
Yeah, it's called Unhooked, the Breaking Porn Addiction podcast. I interview scientists, coaches, relationship and intimacy experts. I do solo episodes, but it's all about overcoming addiction. I focus a lot on porn addiction, but it's really about overcoming any of these compulsive self-sabotaging behaviors. So it could be video games, junk food, and then a lot of just topics about relationships, living with integrity, happiness, just living a better life, improving
Right.
yourself.
Right. If I can make an observation, you openly speak about porn, and again, the fact that you had to overcome it itself, and I would imagine that that in itself is a healthy thing to be able to do, to talk about something that you had to go through that battle yourself, and be as open as you are. There is that fair to say?
Totally. It's one of the reasons I do the podcast is, for me, it's like now I have no trouble talking about it
Right.
publicly. I used to be deathly afraid of talking about it,
Sure. The
but I
shame, I'd
know,
imagine, right? The shame is a big deal. Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
shame is a huge topic, especially in porn addiction and sex addiction.
yeah.
Shame is a massive topic. And I know that me talking about it on my podcast in the way that I do, in a very non-judgmental, just kind of like, hey, this is a thing. You don't need to be ashamed. You're not flawed or broken. That I know so many guys have told me, they say, hey, just hearing you talk about it helped me break free because I was able to let go of my own shame because I thought I was the only one.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. It's really easy when you're going through a problem. If you think you're the only one on the planet has any idea what this thing feels like. And so when you hear, someone going through it, they battle like, oh yeah, I did that last week. And here's what I did. It's no big deal. It's behind them. It's water under the bridge,
Yeah.
so to speak. You, in that moment, you're like, oh my gosh, like someone does know what this feels like. And so I think it's powerful, and certainly could commend you for being able to speak about as openly as you do, for the benefit, not only of yourself, but for others too. So listen, Jeremy, I really, really appreciated, certainly you being here, but also the journey that you've taken, in a manner in which you address your own personal issues, you overcome them, but the big powerful piece around that I talked to earlier is that you now are using that to help other people. And so I commend you for the work that you've done. Congratulations on the work that you've done for yourself and others, and thank you again for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
It's my pleasure.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Much thanks and appreciation for you being here. And I gotta say, I still laughed a little when Jeremy mentioned that even after training as a Buddhist monk, he still needs coffee to get going in the morning. It really is a good reminder that no matter how much awareness or discipline we develop, we're still human at the end of the day. Now, if you're someone who's trying to move forward in life with more clarity and control, today's conversation is truly a powerful reminder that many of the habits holding us back aren't about weakness. They're about unconscious patterns. And the moment we start bringing awareness to those patterns, that's when real change becomes impossible. One of the things that really stood out to me from this chat was the fact that Jeremy reframed addiction and as well as compulsive behavior. It's not just about willpower. It's about recognizing the patterns running in the background of our lives and learning how to reclaim control through awareness, discipline, and intentional action. Now, before we close out today's episode, it's time for audacity in action, a quick look at something happening in the real world that reflects the power of living audaciously. And I've got to say a powerful example of this is Robert Downey Jr. At one point in his life, he was facing repeated arrests and addiction that nearly ended both his career as well as his future. But through recovery, discipline, and personal accountability, he rebuilt his life and went on to become one of Hollywood's most successful actors. And I've got to admit, I'm a bit of a Marvel guy, so seeing him step in the role of Iron Man and helping launch a Marvel Cinematic Universe has been absolutely incredible to watch. And I honestly can't wait to see what happens when he steps into the role of Doctor Doom in the next Marvel film. It's going to be absolutely wild. But his story is a really powerful reminder that when someone becomes aware of the patterns holding them back and commits to change, the next chapter of their life can be bigger than anything that came before. Now, make sure you connect with Jeremy Lipkowitz directly. He's doing some incredible work helping people break free from destructive habits and build more intentional lives through mindfulness and coaching. Of course, we'll include all the appropriate links in the show notes below so you can learn more about him and his work. And if this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And of course, don't forget to follow this podcast and leave a review. Until next time, keep living life audaciously.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay